What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, none other than Jimmy Watkins, cleveland.com columnist, because he does everything: Ohio State, Cleveland Browns, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Jimmy, I just want you to walk the fans and listeners through the last week and a half of your life when it comes to traveling to cover Ohio State, Michigan, being at Ohio State, Indiana, being at Cleveland Browns games, and then making time for Cleveland Cavaliers content when you have the chance. It's been a hectic ride. You've been doing a great job, a lot of great work. Walk us through what life has been like for you.
It's the best time of the year. It's the busiest time of the year. It's hectic. I'm spinning a lot of plates. The beginning of Thanksgiving week, I go Michigan Monday. I didn't go to Ohio State this year, but it's sometimes Michigan, Ohio State, back to Michigan for the weekend for the game. We do the game. We had, of course, Shador's first home start the Sunday after the game. So got to get there for that, actually. There's also a snowstorm coming back from Michigan. So I had to find a shovel at the hotel I was staying at that morning to shovel myself out of there. And then I got to the Brown Stadium and realized I had left my credential at home. So I had to go back home and get it. And then we're getting ready for Big Ten Championship Week, which is a trip to Indy. I didn't make the Browns game on Sunday just because 8 p.m. kicks are tough for football. We didn't get back to the hotel. Me, Andrew, Stefan, and Steven, we didn't get back to the hotel on Saturday night at until 3 in the morning, and I still had to write. So I got home at 3:30 on Sunday, and then all the while I'm either watching every Cavs game live, or I'm watching the highlights the next day, or I'm watching NBA box score stuff, or I'm consuming the pot. I'm trying to keep up with everything as best I can. So now we're kind of breathing for a second again because Ohio State's on a long break, and the Browns are here, but they're going to be in Chicago this week. So we get a chance to breathe. We get a chance to hang out. We get a chance to talk a little basketball. It's good. It's all good. Busy's good.
We know you love hoops, Jimmy, and of course, you tapped into this podcast and a whole lot of other podcasts that keep you in the loop. But this is a Cleveland Cavaliers team that is much different from last year. You're going to be coming back onto the beat after the Browns and Ohio State season ends, and it's going to look a little bit shaky around that time of the year because we're still trying to figure out what version of the Cavs we are going to get. They are 25 games in. This is when Kenny Atkinson said that an evaluation of this team is prominent, is fine, right? Because we get to see a small sample size a quarter of the season into the year. And this team is 14-11. This team is now on a 5-day break because of the in-season tournament being bounced out of that. We just got done watching some teams punch their ticket to Vegas. The Cavs have not done that since the in-season tournament became a thing, since the NBA Cup became something that teams are chasing. Jimmy, just give me your thoughts on where this Cavs team is at and what we learned from practice today at Cleveland Clinic Courts after talking with Kenny Atkinson, DeAndre Hunter, and of course, Thomas Bryant.
The Cavs see this as a do-over. They need a do-over right now. Those first 25 games have been a disappointment. My read on the Cavs as we stand here today, I've reconfigured the question in my head from can they make the finals to can they make the conference finals? It seems like right now they are chasing the version of themselves that they were last year when we thought we would be building on that this year. Right now, there's still a lot of season left. They're still top 10 in both offense and defense. They've still had their moments, but it just seems like right now the main theme has been that these guys are too cool for school. While there can be that could be an easy fix, I'm still open to the idea that it's as simple as, the Cavs finally embrace the grind of the season and turn up their intensity, and they go on a crazy winning streak, and they end up being a top 2 seed in the East and start looking like the team we all thought they could be. But one of the main takeaways to be, you guys aren't engaged enough. That is one of the most frustrating things to watch as a fan, particularly if we're going to sound like a broken record here, when your team hasn't won anything yet. There's an air of confidence about this team, borderline arrogance, right? Because they're just sometimes not taking a put like that Warriors loss over the weekend is just, we're not taking these dudes very seriously. We think we're just going to roll the ball out and win the game because we're better than you guys, because you guys have a bunch of injuries and we have our star players on the court, right? It's entitlement. It's a team that needs to be humbled. And you hope over the first 25 games that took place. There's an opportunity here. We were talking about this at Cavs practice today, you and I. They play the Wizards on Friday, and they're doing a lot of talking about how this is a great time to reset, and they're having difficult film sessions, and they are calling each other out and highlighting mistakes of indifference, mistakes of effort, all that sort of stuff, saying all the right things. They've said the right. That's the thing about this team. They've said all the right things in many cases at every turn. They understand what the problem is, and yet the problem persists. So when they roll that ball out, my take right now is that when they roll the ball out against the Wizards, who are god awful, the Cavs should win that game by about 30 points because they are going to be as healthy as they've been for the first part of the season. Sam Merrill and Max are still important pieces that need to get back. Jared Allen practiced today. That's good news. They're getting healthier. They have this opportunity. Yes, the schedule's been hard. I don't really lend many sympathetic ears on schedule this early in the season and with this young of a team, but the schedule has been hard. They have played, I believe, more games than everybody else. I think they've had more back-to-backs than anybody else. They've been injured, understood, but you've had 5 days off. Show us what you're saying. Put action to words and start kicking some of these teams in the East ass. Like, you're better than them. You know you're better. You're acting like you're better than them. You need to start playing like you're better than them.
Jimmy, I think that's well said, especially the point where you talk about just the overall mentality of this team, right? We came into the season talking about mental toughness being one of the big pieces for this team to have to overcome. Kobe Altman talks about it. Kenny Atkinson talks about it. DeAndre Hunter talks about it then and again today, saying that there's still room for improvement. And that was part of what practice was today. Not only was it when they got onto the court, they were focused on getting back to their defensive principles. And then on Wednesday, they're going to focus on the offense. But they had a player-led meeting on Tuesday ahead of practice where they not only went over film and had tough and accountable conversations with one another, but they also just had a conversation about why this has been happening and what needs to improve. And I think it's a good thing for the Cavs to be doing this 25 games in. If they were doing it 70 games into the season and having player-led meetings, we'd be having a different conversation. But because of the historical context of teams getting to the NBA Finals while having a lesser than ideal start to the season, at least 25 games in, then you understand that this Cavs team isn't as far off as you might have thought. And just to add some context to this conversation, we look at some of the teams from the last 5 years. The 2025 Indiana Pacers were 10-15. The 2024 Dallas Mavericks were 16-9. The 2023 Miami Heat were 11-14. The 2023 Denver Nuggets were 15-10. The 2022 Boston Celtics were 13-12. The 2021 Phoenix Suns were 16-9. And the 2021 Milwaukee Bucks were also 16-9. But Jimmy, multiple times throughout this season, DeAndre Hunter has hinted at the fact that this team needs to be tougher, needs to be physically tougher as well. And it starts with the mental aspect of going to get balls that are simply 50-50. And as Jalen Tyson said before the season, should be 70-30 because of the effort level that this team should demand from it itself and all of the players on it. And to me, when you look at the mental toughness that leaves and derives into the physical toughness, I think that's still an area that is weak for this team and needs to continue to grow. And hopefully, this is what the Cavs are hoping, that the film session, the conversations, this 5 days is going to change the narrative for themselves internally. But that's the ideal mindset. And I'm hoping we get to see a shift in this team when it comes to in Washington against a lower level team. And I wrote about this earlier into the season, Jimmy, how you should go into the United Center every time and suck the air out of the arena because there should be no hope. What the Oklahoma City Thunder did to the Utah Jazz, making their coach erupt on the sidelines, that's how the Cavs should make the Washington Wizards feel when they play against one another.
The mental toughness thing remains the biggest red flag about this team because that's, again, they said all the right things coming out of the playoffs last year. We need to get tougher. What were they saying in the preseason? We need to treat the regular season like it matters because we haven't proven anything yet. I've quoted Donovan on this a bunch of times. We were trying to ask him last spring, how could you showcase mental toughness during the regular season? No slip-ups. Never lose 2 in a row. Like Boston. I don't know why he keeps alluding to Boston. Boston would sleepwalk through the regular season quite a bit. But that's not at all what we've seen. We've seen quite the opposite. Put it simply, the regular season has been too much for the Cavs to handle mentally. What do you think the playoffs are going to look like if these trends continue? It's early. I'll keep saying it. But Kenny Atkinson said today, this feels a lot like being down 2-1 in a playoff series. Huh? No, it's the regular season. They all told us the lesson coming out of last season was that there's nothing about the regular season that can approximate the pressure of the playoffs. And part of that is because they lived such a charming existence in the regular season. But the Cavs have experienced regular season adversity before and sold us this narrative of, oh, we've been through this. This will help us down the road. Evan Mobley and Darius Garland, boy, they missed 6 weeks and our season was teetering. And it sounded like JB Bickerstaff was on the hot seat, and then Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen went superhero, and wow, the season's saved now. And then you lost in 5 games to the Boston Celtics, and you almost lost to the Orlando Magic in the first playoff series of that young core's tenure, right? This is not a facsimile of anything they're going to see in the playoffs. This right here is about getting back to the level that you were out. I need to see the outline, that regular season outline of a contender first before I'm believing anything else about growth of the mentality in the playoffs or anything like that. Like, you're below your starting point right now, and you need to get back to that. That's the first step. Then we can have bigger conversations about what translates to the playoffs and what doesn't. I thought this was going to be a season of adding tweaks and putting sprinkles on top to what was a great meal last year. Instead, they've spent 25 games now, and we'll see how much longer this goes, trying to catch up to where they started. Remember, where they started is not good enough to win more than 1 game against the Indiana Pacers. That's the starting point. And we're still trying to get back to that mentally. The East has changed. The Cavs, you can argue there's still been some growth from individual players. They're not whole yet. But mental toughness-wise, the starting point is 5-game loss in the second round to the eventual Eastern Conference champion Indiana Pacers. And they're still falling short of that so far. That is the biggest concern to this point in the season.
And Jimmy, I think when we talk about what Kenny Atkinson was saying at practice today, he said 2 different things a little bit, right? He's talking about this process that they're going through and how they have to raise their compete level. One, another red flag. You tell us your competitors, right? Obviously, you're NBA players. We saw DeAndre Hunter working out. He was competing in drills. But you tell us your competitors. Why would you have to raise your compete level when it comes to a regular season NBA game when you know everything is under a microscope, especially after the season you had last season? But then you also come and tell us that you're not enjoying this process. You're not enjoying the time off. The 5 days aren't necessarily going to be fun because it's coming with tough conversations, harsh film sessions, uncomfortable scenarios. And I think uncomfortable is good for this team, right? Because when you're in an uncomfortable situation, you learn from it. And I think the major thing that we're waiting to see for this team is how they respond to adversity. Because they keep talking about adversity is good now. Adversity is good now. Adversity is good if you can respond to it. And we haven't seen that. And obviously, the Washington Wizards game isn't really the telltale sign on how they get back to it. Jimmy, I'm more so looking at the last part of this month, but being able to stack wins, being able to stack principles, being able to stack habits is what is most important after the new year. And Jimmy, I want to get into a quick question from our subtexters, one that you asked about during today's practice, which has to do with Evan Mobley. This one comes from Anil from San Francisco. He says, I know a couple pods ago, Chris mentioned consistency for Evan Mobley. To me, Evan has started to turn the corner a little bit. Do you agree? If so, what has led to this? If not, why? Some stats to consider below. This is also why I love Anu, adding in stats to his own question. 20 points in 4 of the last 10 games, double-double in 6 of the last 10 games, career high in assists to date per game, I assume he's mentioning. Well, Jimmy, as you heard from the players, and DeAndre Hunter specifically, he's getting the ball at different positions on the floor that allow him to attack readily and more easily than having to dribble the ball from the three-point line and then attack the rim. So getting the ball at the free throw line extended. And we've talked about this on this podcast, how the Cavs need to be able to give him the ball in more advantageous situations, more advantageous positions. But That's not necessarily what the Cavs have been preaching to us about the growth of Evan Mobley and how he can create offense. But I think they're learning what he's best at and how to utilize him in this offense.
It's caveman basketball. Okay, let's break it down. Cavs have tall player. Cavs give tall player ball closer to basket. Tall player score basket more easy. Caveman basketball. Okay. Evan Mobley to start the season, they tried to put a bunch of different stuff on his plate. They wanted to see how far he could stretch his skill set. I was in favor of it. I wanted to see what Evan Mobley could do with a little bit more freedom. What he ended up doing with it, honestly, is hanging out a lot by the 3-point line. He got real comfortable shooting these 3-pointers that other teams wanted him to give. And I feel like sometimes Kenny's talking out of both sides of his mouth on this, because on the one hand, the Cavs sort of took away some of that freedom, and now they're gearing it. What Kenny said today is that Evan's on an upward trajectory. Tell me if this sounds exactly like what we just said about the Cavs. He is getting back to the Evan of last year. We were aiming for top 5 on MVP candidate to start the season for those keeping score at home. We are now 25 games in the season getting toward back to where he was last year, because the Cavs realized, maybe he's not ready for that super mega leap yet. That last star leap of we just give him the ball and make stuff happen. Okay. Kenny dropped the stat. I didn't get a chance to fact check this yet today, but Kenny dropped the stat that he's near the top of the league, if not the top of the league in dunks over the last month. That's a good sign. For the entire year, actually, one of the few positive signs for him the entire time has been his free throw rate is up. He's shooting more free throws, and that will skew, because some of his percentage of shots from the outside versus inside are skewing a little bit more outside this year. Now, when you're drawing fouls, those don't count as field goal attempts. So that's going to skew the numbers a little bit too. Evan Mobley is still, I think, getting better as an at-rim finisher. But now I think once we settle into, okay, Evan Mobley was the Evan Mobley last year again, then where do you go? We kind of tried to stretch his wings again the start of this year. Didn't work out. There was no Darius Garland. Maybe that can change things. I think he's learning better to modulate the difference between, okay, I do this, I put my head down. Being aggressive means I put my head down at all costs. And being aggressive means me attacking my matchup when I have a good one at the right time, but then still being cognizant of what's around me. I think his assist to usage ratio, that's a weird cleaning the glass stat that is basically like, how often are you making decisions with the ball? And during that time, how often are you getting assists? That's going up. That's good. He's making better decisions with the basketball. But I think that's also because the Cavs are simplifying those decisions for him a little bit. Like, getting from the 3-point line to the rim is different from getting from the free throw line to the rim, or just backing somebody down, right? And I think it is a good thing that he's trending back to where he was, but I'm still wondering about the next step, where they go from there, because that's still the ticket to the promised land. If the Cavs are going to get to the conference finals or the finals, they still need more from Evan Mobley. But you know what? I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself right now, because Evan Mobley and the Cavs are in the same spot right now. They have been below their starting point, and we already know their starting point isn't good enough, but you got to get back to the starting point before we start talking next steps. So the fact that he's getting back closer to what he was last year, I think that's a victory, given how this season started out for him. And let's see where it goes from there. Let's let him settle into this, get comfortable with this again now that Darius is back, and then we'll start asking the bigger, harder questions about Evan again.
Yeah, Jimmy, and as you kind of alluded to in practice today with some of your questions, like, his numbers are reminiscent of last year. Some of the field goal percentage in
They're basically the exact same, except he's less efficient for the most.
Exactly. And the other portion of this, which you said a little bit there at the end, they can't have last year's version of Evan Mobley because it didn't work. It wasn't enough. And Donovan Mitchell is playing to an MVP caliber this year. This year specifically has been one of the best seasons of his entire career. And still they're struggling in the regular season. So he needs help. He needs somebody, even if it's a 1A, 1B situation, rather than a 1 and a 2. Someone has to step up for Donovan Mitchell. And I think this kind of gets into the next question that I wanted to touch on from our subtexters, which comes from Jeff in Harbor, Washington. He says, hoping this 5-day break helps the team get focused. Do you think we might see some shakeup coming out of the break? Maybe DeAndre Hunter to the bench, more minutes, bigger roles for Jalen Tyson, DeAndre Hunter, and Naquan Tomlin. And then he says, give me some optimism on how this team can gel and find winning ways. Well, Jeff, I don't want to burst your bubble here, but Kenny Atkinson was pretty clear about it today that there's not going to be overhaul when it comes to this team. It's more so getting back to the basics. And as much as he didn't like my question from a couple of weeks ago about fundamentals and getting back to the principles of the game that he's trying to instill rather than going to this big analytical view and solely being sucked into the stats of everything that's going on, he talked about that today, about getting back to the principles and the fundamentals of what this Cavs team needs to do. Getting back in transition, rebounding, getting out into the break, getting into the scoring zone with efficiency and purpose. Those are things that the Cavs can change and can fix. But for me, when it comes to giving you optimism about how this team can get back to its winning ways, it's them having these uncomfortable conversations with one another. Last year, they were playing with so much joy that you couldn't see the flaws. Everyone was happy-go-lucky in the new Kenny Atkinson offense, in a new system that was being fostered. But now you're having these hard-hitting conversations, these hard-hitting questions about what areas can the Cavs get better at so that they can get back to their winning ways, as Jeff put it. And to me, Jimmy, I'm not trying to give them excuses, but Jared Allen's been out. As you mentioned, he practiced today. He was a full participant, which bodes well for how he will move throughout the rest of the week. Sam Merrill, still out, right? He did not even practice today. Kenny Atkinson mentioned that swelling is going down, but it's a slow process, right? Especially when we know there's not a lot of meat on these hands. So if it's a big bruise, if it's a big strain, this is going to be a difficult process, especially for a shooter. So he's still doing left-hand drills, conditioning drills, but Sam Merrill still cannot shoot a basketball, per Kenny Atkinson, at this point. Then you have Max Strus. Max Strus is still trying to come back. I know there have been reports about weeks rather than months from other people. Max Strus couldn't bowl at his bowling event on Sunday. I asked him while he was walking by if he was going to bowl, and he said, no, I can't. So that's not a positive sign. Then you talk about how that changes the lineup. And Jimmy, I wrote this for the website the other day. When Max Strus comes back, I think the Cavs are going to send DeAndre Hunter to the bench. And I think the question then becomes whether or not you have Max Strus be the starter and then also add in Jalen Tyson to the starting unit when Darius Garland isn't playing in back-to-backs, or if you have Jalen Tyson simply be the starter from here on out because of how he has impacted the game on both ends of the floor and is one of the best shooters that the Cavs have had. And you allow Max to get back into a rhythm off the bench. Because Kenny Atkinson has alluded to wanting to use DeAndre Hunter more in the second unit on multiple different occasions throughout the season, and how that helps him get more attack heavy, more shots up, especially around players like Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, who have the ball and want the ball in their hands, and especially Evan Mobley at this point in his career as well. So that's the shakeup I'm going to perceive is going to take place, but that's down the line because we still have to wait for these players to get back. As of now, I think a lot of the things are going to stay the same when it comes to lineups and rotations rather than obviously the players who are out, Larry Nance Jr. as well, and trying to figure out if Tyrese Proctor is going to be back, but I didn't see him have practice today either.
Sam and Max are the Cavs' best movers, cutters, off-ball shooters, right? That's a big component of this offense. When you have someone out there who's always the defense has to be checking for because they're 5-alarm fire when they get open from three. That's a huge part of it. That's no doubt. Jared Allen missing time and or playing hurt, no doubt. Darius Garland, no doubt. But to me, the schematic adjustment is freaking play better, play harder, do the things that you're saying that you need to do. They all recognize it. To the point about like finding the joy. Kenny kind of alluded to this. Like finding the joy is you get the joy from doing the stuff right. It's not like joy exists and then you play better. Like to my Ohio State travelings recently, what Ryan Day's been kicking around recently, his catchphrase is fun is kicking ass. That's what's fun. Okay, so you win, the fun follows. You hear all the time these teams who win a bunch of games, the dynastic Warriors during their run, they play with so much joy. Yeah, they were winning 60 games a year. It's pretty fun. Pretty fun out there when you're playing that way. They do also happen to play a fun style. The Cavs, when they're rolling, play a fun style, but when you're not scoring, it's not as fun. I'll co-sign what you're saying about for signs of optimism. It does seem like this team's been humbled a little bit. Like now that they've had a chance to stop and catch their breath and really watch up close how much juice they've been lacking. Again, they're saying the right things. DeAndre Hunter's saying it's a humbling experience. Thomas Bryant is saying he thinks that they'll come out with the right attitude after this break ahead of Friday's game. I've just heard this team say the right thing too many times, and not like I just got to see like a lot of things with the Cavs. I just got to see it, man. Like how many days ago? 5 days ago? 4 days ago? The Cavs had a really nice second half win against the Spurs, and they were telling us that they got their joy back. Remember? They found it. They found it during the Spurs game, a game that coincidentally they won by double-digit points. Huh? Weird. Found your joy when you were winning. And then what they do the next day, they lost to the zombie G League Warriors. There have been moments where maybe they're just starting to put the pieces together, but it's got to be consistent, and it's got to be the simplest. You have to be engaged for no other reason. Like I still think that playoff seeding is going to be really important for this team. I think home court advantage is going to matter a bunch. The Eastern Conference is better than we thought it was going to be. It is. The Celtics, Celtics got some soul. They got some championship DNA over there. Maybe take a note from them. Their best players hurt. They traded away 2 of their other starters, Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. Everyone and their mother is saying, the Celtics, this is the year for them to tank. This is their gap year. Top 5 net rating team. Joe Mazzulla is a psycho. Jaylen Brown is built for this. Jaylen Brown, every time, I remember a couple years ago when the Celtics were, I don't know if it was the year they won the title or the year that they were defending the title. They came in Cleveland, they got beat pretty good by the Cavs. And to a man, basically, everyone in that locker room was saying, it's no big deal. It's the regular season. If we were having this conversation in March, sound familiar? Jaylen Brown went up to the podium. He said, no, this is bad. And we should feel bad about it. When you're playing a game, you should always be trying your hardest to win. We weren't doing that. And from that day forward, I was like, you know what? Jaylen Brown sometimes an inefficient player, sometimes doesn't pass the ball when he needs to pass the ball, doesn't dribble with his left hand the best. But I go in the foxhole with Jaylen Brown. This guy's about all the right stuff. He says it and he backs it up. What have the Cavs been doing this whole year? I like the adversity. Adversity is good for us. You don't know what adversity is if you think this is real adversity. This is self-created, self-generated adversity. They are making it harder on themselves because they're not taking the regular season seriously. And it's multifaceted. There's new guys in the rotation. The Cavs are missing Ty Jerome right now. They might be missing him anyways because he's been hurt a lot of the season, but they are missing that spark plug guy who, okay, we're missing someone tonight. Here's someone who could just get us 20 points when we need to get us 20 points and run an offense. As much as Ty Jerome was like irrational confidence guy last year, he was also one of few bench guys who were averaging like 3.5 assists in whatever minute total. I remember making that list last year. He was a high assist guy for his minute load. They're missing him right now for sure. Lonzo Ball is also not being Lonzo Ball, but even in theory of Lonzo Ball is best added to a healthy Cavs group. He's not the guy that you can turn to and say, help, we need someone else who can be the usage guy. He's not that guy. He's gonna take 2 dribbles, he's gonna get off the ball, or he's gonna hoist a 3-pointer. He doesn't go to the rim anymore. Just how it is. It's look in the mirror and do better. It's really not that complicated.
And just going back to the optimism point real quickly, because I think I've mentioned it on this podcast.
Sorry, that was supposed to be optimistic.
I've mentioned it on this podcast. Like, I think this team needs more fire. The competitive spirit, the competitive fire, it's needed. Them glossing over things, Donovan Mitchell not wanting to necessarily call it a bad thing. Jalen Tyson in second year calling the team out was needed. I mentioned it earlier. Utah Jazz coach being recorded calling out his entire bench is needed sometimes, right? There was other coaches around the league that have got caught chewing out their players. It's a part of the game when you are a competitive ball club. You mentioned it there, Jimmy. Joe Mazzulla is a psycho. He is going to hold his players accountable to a different standard. Every game, it does not matter who they're playing. He expects them to win. Ime Udoka is the same way. Those guys don't smile, right? Those guys are only happy after wins, and you can barely tell. And today, we heard from DeAndre Hunter saying that Kenny Atkinson called them out. I don't know how fiery Kenny Atkinson got when he called them out, but calling them out is a step up. Last year, we were hearing about the throwing of water bottles and the smacking of flip-flops, and everybody was laughing about these things. Sure, Kenny Atkinson has been known to be a psycho. Like Steve Kerr mentioned it when he was here the other day. Like, he used to pace and get miles up when doing his evil mad scientist thought process during playoff runs. And that's needed. But if he's not being taken seriously when guys are out of pocket or when guys need to be checked, need to be corrected, for DeAndre Hunter to say that it was an uncomfortable or a tough film session because Kenny Atkinson doesn't usually do that kind of thing, and he called them out, I think that's a step in the right direction. And I think that's kind of what this Cavs team needs, especially going into the end of December as they face off against teams like the Charlotte Hornets and the Washington Wizards. And then at the end of the month, we know what happens. Christmas comes around, they play the Knicks, then they play the Rockets, then they play the Spurs again. So you can talk about banking wins. These next 4 or 5 games seem simple enough. But again, the Cavs team hasn't given me that kind of reassurance for them to not play down to the level of their opponent and then have to resurge on a Christmas Day game that you earned from your play of last season. I think that's going to be like the big turn of events when it comes to this Cavs season, where all eyes are going to be and how they respond and how they act at that kind of
To be clear on
juncture.
Kenny, this is a return to his roots. When he was with the Brooklyn Nets and he was coaching, and this is how you kind of have to be sometimes with really, really young teams that like Kenny had in Brooklyn, or even just like teams that need to be greater than the sum of their parts. Like Jared Allen has said, like, if you didn't know him, you might rub you the wrong way. Like he would rip into guys. He was an intense coach. That's part of the reason I think like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving weren't into Kenny. This is why Kenny went on his assistant coach odyssey to learn from Ty Lue and Steve Kerr, like when to push those buttons, how to manage superstars, because you can't just go around in the NBA anymore because the players have so much freaking power and make so much freaking money. You can't just go around screaming at superstars all the time, willy-nilly. Donovan says he embraces it. I think he's an outlier in that regard. The Clippers just kicked Chris Paul off their team for trying to switch Kawhi off of Klay Thompson in the middle of the game because Klay was killing him. Okay? There's a lot that goes into that. Chris Paul's older. He doesn't have the same kind of juice that he might have in an organization that he might have when he was younger. But like, if it wasn't Kawhi, if it was someone who's a little bit more open to criticism, you think that might have happened? You think that would have happened? I don't think so. I think Chris Paul would still be on the Clippers. It's not just the message, it's the way you message it. Okay. Chris Paul for years has been known as someone who can rub people the wrong way. But I think Kenny might have overcorrected a little bit when he got to Cleveland. He learned from Steve Kerr, be the Zen guy. And Steve Kerr throws clipboards too sometimes, but be the Zen guy. Give players ownership of the offense. Let them try to figure out player-led culture. Ty Lue was able to get to the point where he and LeBron had a good relationship. LeBron's not an easy guy to coach. He's coached Kawhi Leonard, Paul George over there. He was. Now you got James Harden, even harder. Got James Harden, Kawhi Leonard over there, the Clippers. Kenny saw that up close. He came over here. I think he applied those lessons last year. It really worked because they were coming from a guy in JB Pickerstaff who maybe pushed too far the other way. I think Kenny was a breath of fresh air in that regard. Remember, we had all these guys telling us, like, man, it feels like if I miss this shot, I won't get benched. That's pretty nice. Well, this year, I think now they need to be pulled in a little bit. Now they need to be humbled. Now they need to be, I guess, yelled at, however you want to deliver that message. And so now it's a return to his roots. And now it's mixing what he was with what he's become and trying to find this balance for a team that clearly needs a kick in the rear right now.
Steve Kerr said it kind of like New York Kenny, because Kenny from New York. New York Kenny was all out in full force in Brooklyn. He got to come to sunny San Francisco and chill out a little bit and relax. And now it's like, oh, you got to find that middle ground. And I think that's important. But Jimmy, I want to get your thoughts just on the landscape of the Eastern Conference and obviously the NBA as a whole. But I feel like the Western Conference is what it is. You have OKC running away with it, 23-1 currently, potential to break the record for wins in a season. But when you look at the Eastern Conference, Detroit sits at the number 1 seed. They're 2.5 games ahead of the New York Knicks. The Boston Celtics are the 3rd seed. They're 4 games behind the Pistons. The 4th seed is Orlando Magic. Then it's the Raptors. Then it's the 76ers. And then the Cavs are in the 7th seed, play-in bound currently with the Heat, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Milwaukee Bucks, which outside of the Miami Heat, that would be an interesting play-in tournament if things paved out how it is right now. But Jimmy, I first want to give you credit for a take that you had early into the season, before the season actually, when we were doing our predictions. You did have Toronto as a sleeper. How they were constructed, obviously getting Brandon Ingram back from injury last year is huge. They've been a team that's been interesting, been decent to see play, and a team that has given the Cavs a run for their money, winning all 3 contests against them already this season. But Jimmy, The Cavs are the 7th seed. They're 14-11. What do you think about where they sit 25 games in, and what is the most logical thing for them or most feasible place for them to be at? Because we came in saying they were the unequivocal number 1 seed, could be the number 2 seed.
Well, the good news is they're only a game and a half out of 3, right? So as for all of our hand wringing and all of the valid concerns that we have about this team, big picture, for them to get where they need to go, they're even 3 games behind the Knicks for the 2nd seed. They're one really good run away. I do think they're going to have at least one really good run. They're too talented to not, unless things completely fall apart, to not make one at least really impressive run over the course of the season. They're one really good run away from being in the top 3, being about where they need to be. I think at the beginning of the season, I would have liked them to get the number 1 seed. I don't know. We'll see about how Detroit keeps going at this point. They seem legit. They seem like they're going to be tough for teams to catch in the regular season. They're a superpower. One of their superpowers, intensity, physicality, the things that the Cavs don't have. But I will put it to you this way: the Cavs regular season can be fine. The playoffs, we came into this season thinking, damn, they're going to cakewalk into the conference finals. Who's going to challenge them outside of New York? That is no longer the case. I just talked about Detroit. I have questions about some of their lineups. They play up to like 4 non-shooters sometimes. I don't know how Cade's getting into the paint with these guys, but they're freaking mean. They're freaking physical. They play really good defense. Jalen Duren is a big problem. He might be an all-star. He's hulked out. He's so strong. That's a guy who I could see giving the Cavs problems down low. The Pistons get offensive rebounds. The Pistons play defense. The Pistons impose their will on you. They make you play their style. That's the matchup that I'm now circling and saying, I think I'd pick the Cavs, but let's see. The Knicks, we know. Boston Celtics, we're on the list before the season. It's another team I was thinking, like, the Celtics are at least going to get into the play-in. Like, these guys are crazy, and potentially Jason Tatum might play. Well, now they're the 3rd seed. Now they're finding, like, they're looking like, over the last month or so, like, kind of an elite team. And now the Jason Tatum question is really interesting if they can keep this up. If they can linger even in, like, the top 6. If the Celtics are definitely a playoff team, I think we're going to start hearing about Jason Tatum getting ready to play before the regular season's over and trying to tune up for a playoff run. That's a wrinkle we didn't anticipate. We don't know what he's going to look like if he were to come back, right? But that's a team that you didn't think you were going to have to reckon with. Now I think you might have to reckon with them, right? The Magic and the Raptors, I'll put them in similar boats. They both have excellent positional size. They both play excellent defense, and they both bother the Cavs. We've seen it. The Raptors put a ton of pressure on you, put a ton of pressure on the Cavs. They throw a lot of length at them. They haven't handled it well during the matchup so far this season. Again, with Toronto, I have questions about how some of that stuff is going to translate to the playoffs with some of the 3-point shooting that we're seeing, how much of it is real, all that stuff. The Toronto Raptors are not going to be a fun team to see in the playoffs. The Orlando Magic are starting to kind of round into the team that we thought we were going to see for the season. They just beat the Heat tonight in the NBA Cup. Desmond Bane had 37 points. Desmond Bane is starting to shoot the ball like Desmond Bane. You're seeing their offense unlock as a result. Franz is hurt now. Paolo was hurt before. They kind of straightened it out while Paolo was hurt, and now they're asking Paolo to do it while Franz, like, at some point this team is going to get whole again, and if they can hang around the 3-4 range and then get whole and figure out, apply the lessons that they've learned, that's a team that we already know has given this version of the Cavs problems. Game 7 problems in the playoffs. Now they're more mature. Now they've added a couple of really interesting pieces. Desmond Bane could be a game changer. We're 4 or 5 teams deep, and I'm just like, the landscape of the East has changed. It's no longer a walkthrough. It's no longer, I think I hinted at this at the beginning of the season. I'll say it again here. I no longer feel, I used to think that the Cavs could correct essentially nothing about their playoff flaws and still win 2 rounds in the playoffs. I now feel like the Cavs have to make a jump from where they were to potentially even win 2 rounds in the playoffs, depending on how the matchups break down. And by the way, the matchups might break down a little funkier because you've started so poorly. We're like a third of the way into the season, basically. And you're the 7th seed. I think they'll probably end up in the top 3, but that changes. If you're the 1 seed and you're playing 4 or 5, completely different. Like, you might have to play the Knicks in the 2nd round. You might have to play the Pistons. Like, these teams that we're talking about potentially, like, you would think as conference finals problems. Or what if they become 2nd round problems? What if you have to beat 2 of these teams to get to the finals when you thought you only had to beat 1? Like, you're opening Pandora's box here by taking a nonchalant approach to the regular season. The regular season doesn't matter for teams like the Thunder, who ironically are murdering the regular season, and I would bet money at this point are going to break the regular season wins record. It doesn't really matter to them. It didn't really matter to the LeBron Cavs teams who knew they could figure this stuff out. It does matter to you. It does. Because you need the seeding. You can't just be... These Cavs, I'm not convinced, can just waltz into the playoffs any seed and then turn it on and say, yeah, we're the best team in the East. That's not how it works for them. That's not how it's going to work for them.
Yeah, Jimmy, and I agree with you there. I just think it's going to be difficult. And I floated this to Spencer Davies when he was on the podcast. I believe it was last week. I think the Cavs playing the Pistons would be one of the most fun series we've seen in the Eastern Conference in a long time. Like first, second round, I don't think it's going to be an Eastern Conference Finals matchup, but I do think that when it comes to just the overall view of J.E. Bickerstaff versus Kenny Atkinson, defense versus offense, just the principles set in place for both teams, physicality versus free-flowing, the philosophy-based conversations that we're having with this team, especially when we know the identity of the Detroit Pistons. And I keep saying this, but the Cavs continue to use the word identity, but fail to articulate to me what that actually is for them. Obviously, defense first is what it is. And right now, it really just looks like Evan Mobley.
They're great on articulating it. They just don't embody it. They love talking about what they are. They just don't. They don't show us.
If you look at the Detroit Pistons, if you look at the Houston Rockets, if you look at these other teams that have known it, even when players are injured, physicality is a big key for them. OKC, guard your yard, switch everything. Everybody's going to be involved on the defensive end of the floor. And then on the offensive end, give the ball to Shea and he'll make the right play. But I think the Cavs are still searching for what works best for them. I think injuries play a part in that. But as I continue to say on this podcast, an identity should not be based on who you have on the floor. Literally supposed to be something that you can rely on any given night, no matter who's out, no matter who's in. And the Cavs have not been able to do that. It has changed every single night. We're waiting to see what this Cavs team is going to do. They're going to allow media to talk to us one more time before they get back on the court. I believe it's going to be Thursday. So we'll get to hear more from this team, and we'll get to have more context on what this Cavs team is working on, where they sit, the health of the players, and all that is coming soon. So that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.